Every month since 2001, Alex has put $450 aside. He has never missed one. Not once in 25 years. And he is further away from owning a house than the day he started. Not because he saved less. He saved exactly the same. In 2001, saving $450 a month got him a deposit in 6 years. Today, the identical habit takes almost 15. His father did the same thing and retired on time. So did his grandfather. The thing carrying his father wasn't the saving. It was a promise, in writing, that someone else would carry the risk. And in 1978, in a single subsection of a tax bill written for executives, that promise quietly changed hands. Nobody campaigned on it. Nobody debated it. Nobody voted for the thing it became. So we're going to follow that jar. $450 a month, all the way from 2001 to this morning, and exactly where each piece of it went. 4 things happened to Alex's money. None of them were his fault, and only one of them is the one everybody talks about. There's a story people tell about the good old days of saving. You put money in a savings account, and the interest actually beat inflation. Saving worked by itself without you understanding a thing. It's a lovely story. And for the decade everyone means when they say it, it isn't true. A rule called Regulation Q put a ceiling on what your bank was allowed to pay you. Through the 1970s, that ceiling was 5.25%. Inflation went straight past it and kept going. So the ordinary saver, doing everything right, earned a capped return while prices ran away. In real terms, they lost money. Quietly, every year. Small savers weren't beating the system. They were subsidizing it. So, the first thing that happened to Alex's money was nothing at all. The account it sat in was never the engine. It wasn't the engine for his father either. We just tell ourselves it was. One down. Which raises the obvious question. If the savings account wasn't what made his father's generation secure, what was? The answer is boring, and it is enormous. It was a promise called a defined benefit pension, not a pot of money you managed, not an account with your name on it that went up and down. A promise. Work here, and we will pay you a fixed income every month until you die. The important word there isn't income. It's we. The company carried the risk. Markets fell. Company's problem. You lived to 98. Also the company's problem. Your grandfather didn't have a better savings strategy than you. He had a different contract. He was owed something. You are merely allowed to contribute to something. And this wasn't an American quirk. Germany built the same instinct even deeper. They've had the Sparbuch, the savings book, since 1818. And once a year they made a festival of it, World Savings Day, born at a congress in Milan in 1924. Savings banks handed school children tins they couldn't open themselves, and once a year the branch was decorated like a birthday party while the bank opened them. Saving wasn't advice. It was a civic ritual you were raised inside. And underneath that ritual sat the same kind of promise the Americans had, only run by the state rather than the employer. You pay in while you work, and the generation working after you pays you when you stop. Not a pot with your name on it. A chain. Each generation carrying the one before. 2 countries. 2 versions of the same arrangement. Ordinary people put a little aside, and underneath them sat a promise, made by somebody bigger, that the floor would hold. Then the floor was renegotiated. Not in public. And there's the second. Except it isn't something that happened to his money. It's something missing from beside it. His father put the same modest amount into the same disappointing account and had a promise sitting next to the jar. Alex has the jar. 2 down. So how do you lose a promise that big without anybody noticing? Before 1978, there's a law you need to know about, because it's the reason all of this happened without anyone deciding to do it. Through the 1960s, pensions had a habit of evaporating. A company could promise you an income for life, run the plan underfunded for 30 years, then close and walk away, owing you nothing. Perfectly legal. So, in 1974, Congress fixed it, funding rules with teeth and a government insurer standing behind the promises. It worked. People who would have been robbed weren't. It also turned a vague moral promise into a hard, funded, legally enforceable, permanently expensive liability on the company's books. Offering a pension had just got a great deal more costly. And 4 years later, in 1978, Congress passed the Revenue Act, a large, dull, sprawling tax bill that did many things. Buried inside it was a short subsection. Section 401, paragraph K. 401K. You've heard of it. It's had an entire industry built on top of it. And it was not written to replace your pension. It was written to settle a narrow, technical, deeply unglamorous argument about executive pay. Specifically, when a highly paid employee defers part of their bonus to next year, when exactly does the tax bite? Now or later? That's the whole ambition of the clause. A timing question for people who were already doing fine. 2 years later, in 1980, a benefits consultant named Ted Benna sat down and read that subsection properly, and he noticed something the drafters hadn't. Nothing in the wording restricted it to executives. If it worked for a vice president deferring a bonus, it worked for everybody. Benna built the first one at his own firm, added an employer match to get people to join, and the modern 401k existed. He did nothing wrong. He read a law carefully and found a door in it. But the mechanism that would come to hold the retirements of tens of millions of people was not designed for that job. It was repurposed into it by a private consultant from a tax clause about bonuses. Benna himself said later that he'd helped create a monster. His word, not mine. So here's the whole mechanism in one sentence. In 1974, the promise became expensive to keep. In 1978, an alternative appeared that cost almost nothing to offer. No employer had to be cynical. No employer had to hate their workers. They just had two doors, and one of them was cheaper, safer, and entirely legal. Here's why this matters more than any argument about fees or returns. A pension and a 401k are not two versions of the same product. They point in opposite directions. Under a pension, the company promises you an outcome and carries every risk of delivering it. Under a 401k, the company promises you an account. What comes out the other end is your problem. Market crash the year you turn 64. Your problem. Live longer than your money. Your problem. Nothing was stolen. The risk simply changed shoulders, and once companies understood that, the direction of travel was never in doubt. In 1980, 38% of private sector workers were in a defined benefit pension. By 2008, 20%, cut roughly in half. In the bigger firms, it was sharper still. Among full-time staff at medium and large private employers, coverage fell from 80% in 1985 to 63% just 4 years later. 4 years. That's not a trend. That's an exit. And at no point in any of this was there a vote. Congress voted on a tax bill in 1978. Of course it did. But nobody ever asked the country, should we stop promising workers a retirement and give them an account instead? That question was never put. It was answered anyway. By consultants, by accountants, by 1,000 boardroom decisions that each made sense on their own. That's the uncomfortable bit. There was no they at all. And almost nobody fought it because the letter didn't read like a loss. Your own account. Your name on it. Portable when you change jobs, which the old pension honestly punished you for doing. All true, and genuinely better. And underneath it sat the sentence nobody put in the letter. From now on, if this doesn't work, that's on you. That's how the largest transfer of risk in modern working life was delivered. Not as a cut, as an upgrade. Third, his 450 stopped being savings and quietly became his, And while it was being handed that second job, it was also shrinking. $450 in 2001 has the buying power of about $239 today. Prices roughly doubled underneath him. 3 down, 1 left, and the last one is the one that actually decides whether he ever gets the house. Which brings us back to Alex and the year he started. 2001, $450 a month. And in that exact same year, 5,000 kilometers away, Germany did its own version of 1978. The 2001 pension reform, named after the labor minister who carried it, Walter Riester. It changed the formula governing how German public pensions rise, so that gradually the public pension covers less than it used to, and alongside it put a new subsidized private account to fill the gap you were now expected to fill yourself. Same movement, different language, different paperwork. The state steps back. The individual is handed the difference and told it's an opportunity. 2 countries, 23 years apart, arriving at the same place. Neither of them announced it as what it was. Which leaves the fourth. And this one never touches the money at all. It happens to the target, and the thing he was saving toward moved faster than that. The median new home went from about $173,000 to $398,000, which is why the same $450 a month that bought him a deposit in 6.5 years now takes 14.5. Now, here's the number that ends the argument about discipline. Suppose Alex had raised his saving every single year to keep exact pace with inflation. $849 a month by now. He'd still be looking at nearly 8 years instead of 6.5. Saving harder does not close the gap. The gap isn't made of saving. Every generation gets told the same thing. That saving is a character trait, and the people who ended up secure were simply more disciplined than you. But look at what his father actually had. A capped account that lost to inflation, and a promise that somebody else would carry the risk. The saving was the visible part. The promise was the part doing the work. For about 40 years, ordinary people were quietly carried by something they never had to understand, never chose, and mostly never noticed. Then it was handed back to them, one subsection at a time. Now, this is exactly the moment where a video like this starts telling you what to do with your money. We're not going to. That's not what this channel is for, and honestly, it isn't our business. Not a single dollar. It's your call, your life, your rules. All we do here is explain the mechanism. But there is something you can take out of this, and it isn't a destination for your $450. It's a better question. Your grandfather's security didn't come from where he put his money. It came from somebody else carrying the risk of him being wrong. So the question that actually matters isn't where your money goes. It's a much less comfortable one. Who is carrying your risk now? For most people watching this, the honest answer is, you are. All of it. The market risk, the longevity risk, the what if I get ill risk, every piece that used to sit on somebody else's balance sheet. That's not advice. That's just the arrangement you were moved into without ever being asked, and knowing you're the one holding it is worth more than any tip about where to put the jar. Nobody stole your pension. That's what makes it hard to be angry about, and harder to undo. It was written for executives, read by a consultant, adopted by employers, and it became the retirement of tens of millions of people without ever once being put to anybody as a question. They took your pension, and nobody voted. And here's why this is the last piece rather than a separate problem. Your paycheck buys less than it used to. A house now takes 2 incomes instead of 1. And the promise that used to sit underneath both of those, the thing that meant you didn't have to win at either, was quietly handed back to you. On their own, each one looks like something you failed at. A budget you can't hold, a deposit you can't reach, a retirement you're behind on. They're not three failures. They're one arrangement, and you were moved into it without being asked. Watch for the silent one. He's been in every video we've ever made. This has been ContextTrail. If you want the other two pieces, the video on why your raise was a pay cut is where the paycheck goes, and the one on the two-income house is where the deposit went.